Hi everyone, I hope all is well. My name is Ashanti and welcome to Uniquely Ashanti's Corner. And as you can see from the title, I'm going to be sharing an update on post-grad life. The last time that I posted videos about this was back in February of 2019. And if you have not seen them, I'll link it somewhere in this video. You should be seeing something popping up on your screen about now. So I strongly suggest that you go and watch part one and part two of that first before you watch this update. Anyway, I know people normally post an update a few months later or at least a year later, but I didn't. And it's not because I forgot or was too busy. It was simply because there was nothing that had changed. I was still without a job. I still didn't have a blog up and running yet. And I was still struggling with motivating myself and getting back to writing again. And just so you know, this is going to be a pretty lengthy video. So I'm going to split this up into two parts, with this being part one. And so let me start in 2019. After some time passed from when I made my first post-grad video, I was just starting to get back into writing again after dealing with writer's block. I I started writing down ideas and even wrote a, a couple of blog posts that I wanted to publish on my blog, whenever I did create a blog. But something happened during that time. Right when I was getting back into writing, I got into a disagreement with a relative about something, and I prefer not to go into details about that. At the time, I was so angry that it consumed my mind to the point where I just couldn't focus on writing anything anymore. So I did something that a writer is always instructed to never do, which is to put all of your energy into submitting to various publications for consideration without working on new ideas. I was not staying creative. I regret that I did not follow that advice because it took me several steps back. And when I look back at that moment, I know that was a result of my post-grad anxiety. It played a big, big part in why I got so upset about that particular incident. When I was in that type of mind frame, it really didn't take a lot for me to get extremely disturbed about something, no matter how minor it was. So since I was working as a volunteer editor at a magazine, I hoped that it would help me to get out of this creative rut that I dug myself into. And unfortunately, it didn't really help much, but I was staying hopeful. My time during that year was spent submitting to various publications and mostly getting decline letters, working as a volunteer editor, and trying to research opportunities for editorial internships so I could gain skills to become an editor. But since so many places are looking for some type of work experience and want you to be enrolled in school prior to applying, it was really hard. I ended up putting the intern thing to the side, thinking that it was just a waste of time. I tried looking into freelance, not freelance writing, but freelance editing a little bit, but I wasn't really too sure about it. So I just focused on building up my skills while working as a volunteer editor. But I soon realized that I wasn't getting all the skills I wanted, since the editor-in-chief and senior editor at the magazine I was working one-on-one with had very busy schedules, which I understand. We all have commitments to attend to, and I greatly appreciate the time that they did have to spend with me. And I know gaining skills takes time. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. But since I didn't receive responses from them for long, extended periods of time due to their hectic schedules, I felt like it was slowing me down. And I didn't feel like that it was fair to them if I wasn't where I should be. And it wasn't working for me to just wait and wait and wait to hear back from them. So we soon agreed that instead of working as a feedback editor, I would just work as a reading editor, which is someone who reads submissions, lets the editor-in-chief know if certain submissions should be considered for publication or not, and offer very, very light proofreading on the accepted pieces. And for a few months, I was okay with the change, but it got tiring very quickly. While I was glad to be helping them, I wasn't being challenged in the same way as when I was doing constructive feedback. But I just said, you know what? Okay, I'm gaining some type of experience, which I can put on a resume. So let me just keep going with this. It's okay. But on a positive note, I did have two victories in 2019. As I noted in my first post-grad video, I got my very first non-fictional piece published. And the second victory that I want to add to this list is that I won my very first writing contest. So in 2019, I was celebrating first. And then 2020 came crashing through the window for everybody. We were hit with the pandemic and several news stories about racism. The rise in civil injustice we saw on our TV screens, our smartphones, and on our computers, it sent me through a roller coaster of emotions. I was angry, I was frustrated, sad, and anxious. And thanks to the pandemic, it was very hard for me to just take a break from it. Even if I stayed away from the news on my TV and my computer, I had relatives that were watching the TV in their rooms. I heard them talking to people on the phone about it. And then my parents talked to me a lot, and I do mean a lot about it. And simply telling them I prefer to not talk about this right now it was just out of the question. And I remember when Michael Brown was murdered in 2014, the violent protest and then a radical protester killing police officers who had nothing to do with Michael Brown's murder left me with a very heavy heart. And one night, my father was talking to me about Michael Brown and the protest, and I remember I said, yeah, I know what you mean, but I just want to break from the conversation. I don't even want to talk about this anymore. And my words just went completely over my father's head, and he just kept talking. He paid no attention to what I said. But I get it. I get it. This is a topic that hits very close to home for him, and he always has a lot to get off of his chest when it comes to this topic. When he starts talking about it, he just goes on and on and on and on about it. One time, my father talked for an hour and a half about his experiences with racism, and I just sat there quietly and just nodded. And I know my father wants to make sure his children are safe by telling them the hard facts of life, of being Black in America. But at the same time, some people like myself really just need a break from the dialogue. And that's one thing that I really miss about not being in school anymore. Being involved with my studies and talking with classmates allowed me to ensure that my mind was focused on something else instead of just talking about the news all the time. And it's not like I was running away from it or anything, don't get me wrong. It's just that it kept me from ingesting so much information that it started to affect me mentally. Because too much of anything is bad for anyone, right? And in 2020, once you barely digested one story of injustice, you were hit with another one. And it was just happening back to back to back to back. And many people just couldn't walk away from the news because of quarantine. You're at home and the news is just right there. It's right there in your face. And because of that, it really affected my motivation. I was already struggling with being motivated since I wasn't being challenged as an editor at the magazine I was volunteering for, and the civil unrest of 2020 made it so much worse. And I stopped submitting to publications. I stopped researching jobs and trying to figure out how to gain skills to become an editor. I stopped trying to figure out how to get rid of my writer's block. I stopped reading books, which I started in early 2020 so I could get inspired to write again. I was even struggling with reading my Bible regularly. The only thing that I was consistent in was working as a volunteer reading editor at that magazine. That's it. I was too consumed with the subject of racism. I was even contemplating making a video about it for my channel, and I kid you not, I was even considering writing a book of poetry that focused on the Black experience. But I never made a video, which obviously you guys noticed. And I broke another rule of being a writer, which is to note any idea you get, even if you're not sure that you're going to act on that idea. I never wrote down one idea that I had, and here's why. When I was going through these emotions, I prayed and I asked God to lift it from me, all these emotions, because it was weighing too heavy on me. It was just so heavy on me. And eventually he answered my prayer. And when he did, he helped me to realize that making a video about racism in a book of poetry, it just wasn't coming from the right place. I still stand by the writing rule of writing things down, but I also feel like that it's important to carefully consider where is your mind when you get that idea, and does it really represent your voice? And when you're able to do that, I feel like that you're maturing as a writer. I allowed myself to get distracted, and many others are doing the same, and that's what the enemy wants. He loves to see this chaos, but we have to stay focused on what truly matters, which is prepping ourselves for the kingdom and fighting against the enemy's attacks. The days are getting darker and darker, and the path is narrow. If we want our next destination to be heaven, we need to get our priorities in check. We need to get our house in order, get your soul, your heart, and your mind in order. Make sure that you are armed in the full armor of Christ, and don't allow distractions to get you off track. Now, let me fast forward to my birthday in 2020. I was still grappling with all these emotions, right, that I mentioned earlier. That morning, I was thinking to myself, wow, I am at this age, here I am at this age, and I'm not where I want to be. What's going on with my life? And I remember my father had called me on the phone and wished me happy birthday, and it put me in a good mood. However, the tone of the conversation just took a sudden turn that was unexpected for me. My father then inquired about my progress with volunteer editing, since I wasn't talking about it that much, to which I said, well, there's not much to tell because there's nothing new happening. Then my father asked me how long had it been since I had graduated, which was going on 2 years. And he made the suggestion that it was time for me to start creating goals. And when he said that, my stomach just kind of sank. Now, let me just say this before I continue. My father has been completely supportive when I was in school and when I graduated from college. He never pressures me. He always allows me to go at my own pace, and I am very grateful for that. I am. And when my father made that comment, it's not like he said it in a mean way or anything. As a parent, it is his right to make sure that I'm on the right track. But at the same time, there is a time and place for everything. Like, if someone you know just lost a loved one, for example, you want to just come to them and say, well, you're still going to do that thing for me, right? You gave me your word. No, you wouldn't do that, because people need time to grieve. And in my opinion, this is just my opinion, I feel like certain questions should be avoided on certain occasions. Even though I personally don't make a big deal about my birthday, I still say you may not know where someone's mindset might be on that day. Again, that's just my opinion. Anyway, when my father brought that subject up, that really changed my mood. Even though he didn't stay on the subject long, everything else that he was saying about him being grateful about having me as a daughter and how much he loved me, it wasn't really sticking because my mind was just focused on that one comment that he made. I just feel like if my father came to me a few days later or a few weeks later after my birthday, maybe I would have handled it a little bit better. But once I got off the phone with him, and I promise you, I am not over exaggerating when I say this, I heard a booming, thunderous voice in my head that said, "You are a failure." And that's when the tears just started to fall. I mean, here I am sitting on the floor in my room, just boo-hoo crying. I was just blubbering through sobs. I haven't accomplished nothing. I haven't done nothing. I'm a failure. And then these thoughts came into my head. I'm a disappointment to my family. I'm a disappointment to myself. I let my family down. But that sad fest did not last long. I started talking to myself out loud. I said, no, you are not about to do this today. You're going to stop this crying, feeling sorry for yourself. God bless me to see another day. Celebrate that. You are not a failure. You are not a disappointment. That is nothing but a lie because you have accomplished so many things. Stop this crying. You can think about what's next another day, but not now, not today. So I went into my bathroom and cleaned up my face and asked God to calm my spirit, kept talking to myself out loud, and eventually he was able to calm my spirit. And I'm glad that I was able to do that because I did not want my family to see me like that. Then a few hours later, my strange older sister called me and I didn't answer the phone. I just sat on my bed and stared at the phone while it was ringing, and she sent her birthday wishes in a text message because she claimed that the voicemail wasn't working. I didn't answer the phone because not only would our conversation be filled with a whole lot of awkward pauses since we don't have a close relationship at all, I knew the subject of where I'm going career-wise was going to come up, and I just didn't want to deal with that, especially what just happened earlier with my father. In fact, I avoided talking to my sister all of 2020 because of that. Whenever a relative of mine video called her on the phone, I got out of the room as fast as I could. And in the rare times that my relative would force me to say something to her, I just kept it extremely brief, which wasn't hard because my relative quickly took the phone away after I said hi, which never bothered me. And just for the record, it's not unusual for my sister and I to not talk for long periods of time, given the type of relationship that we have. My sister and I really only contact each other to wish the other happy birthday or sometimes to give a congratulations for some type of accomplishment. I didn't answer her call because I was concerned about how I would react to whatever she said, given my mental state at that moment going through this post-grad thing. I did not trust myself. I was concerned that I might say something out of anger and frustration because, like I mentioned earlier, it doesn't take a lot for me to just go off when I was in that mindset. And the ending result would be me facing backlash from a certain relative who is more concerned about my sister's feelings. I'm not a confrontational type of person, don't get me wrong, but like I said, since I wasn't in the right mindset, I felt like it was very likely that I was going to say something wrong. So I thought that the best thing to do was to protect my sanity by staying away from my sister, especially when she and a certain relative were on video calls together. You see, the thing about my estranged sister and my other relative is that they double team against me often when it comes to what I do, what I don't do, and my opinion on things. And I didn't need that type of drama. I wanted to protect my peace. And I know that this is going to sound really strange, and it may even sound harsh, what I'm about to say, but I'm trying to be as honest as I can in this video to help whoever is watching this. I was actually glad that the pandemic gave me an excuse to not see my sister's son, my nephew, who was a baby at the time. Whew, it feels weird for me to even say that out loud. Okay, you know, just to be clear, before anybody gets ready to come for me in the comments, I absolutely wanted to meet my nephew. This had absolutely nothing to do with him. I wanted to meet my nephew and hold him in my arms. I wanted to. I did. At the time, I only interacted with him very briefly during video calls. But I just didn't want to deal with my estranged sister and her negativity. That's it. I didn't want to deal with her. It did not have anything to do with me not wanting to see my nephew or anything. It had to do with I didn't want to deal with her. That's what that was. And there were times that my relative would say that my sister was planning on coming over during a time that I was still trying to figure everything out in my life, and I was panicking on the inside. I was panicking. And it was to the point that my stomach would start hurting bad. I lost my appetite and I couldn't think straight. But thankfully, something always came up and she wasn't able to come. I always said that I was practicing social distancing whenever my relative would ask me if I wanted to go see my nephew. And to an extent, that was true because I am taking this pandemic seriously. I am. But in reality, I was breathing a sigh of relief because if this pandemic wasn't going on, there would be so much drama about why I didn't want to go see my nephew and connect with him. If I told my estranged sister and my other relative about my post-grad anxiety, they would not understand it. They would not. That's one thing that I know for certain. My relative would be like, oh, just shake it off. Stop being so sensitive. When people see you like that, they think you're weak. And as for my sister, my estranged sister, she's not going to give me any sisterly advice. I know that. So many times in the past, I tried to open myself up to her, and she would either forget things that I told her or she refrained from giving advice or words of encouragement. And because of that, I put a limit on how much information that I tell her. That's what I do. I wanted to protect my peace, and I still want to protect myself physically because of the pandemic. Even though my sister is a mom now, she still has a very nonchalant, contradictory type of attitude about all of this and protecting herself and her son. She even got the virus this year, and she still hasn't learned from it. So since this is how I was feeling, I just said to myself, if I ever decide to talk to my sister on the phone again for a longer period of time, it'll be whenever I finally get a paying job or some type of internship where I'm gaining some skills. So I won't have to hear anything negative from her mouth or my other relative. But for now, I'm just going to keep it strictly to emails and text messages. And if I must talk to her on a video call, I'm going to be extremely, extremely brief. So About 2 or 3 months later, I was slowly able to release some of these emotions while other emotions still remained. But the strange thing is that now I was feeling emotionally numb to the civil unrest. I didn't even feel anything when white supremacists took over the state capitol. I mean, I had a feeling that something like that was going to happen, so I wasn't surprised by it at all. I remember my father called me into the room and showed me the news story on CNN, and he gave his thoughts on excuse me, gave his thoughts on it. And he was clearly upset about it. He was bothered by it, and my only response was, yeah. And I just left the room. It's a strange feeling to see how others are reacting to something and you don't feel the same way. It's kind of like when a group of people are telling a joke and you're the only one that doesn't get it. But the emotional numbness actually allowed me to start writing again. And in 2020, I was finally able to write up a few articles that I plan on publishing whenever I'm ready to start up a blog. And I have more ideas that I want to work on. And it really felt good that I was starting to tap back into my skill. And this new feeling that I was experiencing, it actually has been a blessing. So this concludes part one of my post-grad update. Thank you for tuning in. Before you leave, though, there will be a link down below in the comment section to a poll that I created. If you have not voted yet, can you please do so before you exit out of this video? I think currently right now there's like 3 votes so far, and it would really be very helpful to me. Also, feel free to share your thoughts down below in the comment section, or you can wait until you watch part two. That's totally fine. I'm fine either way. Um, if you do leave a comment, please refrain from profane language. Even if it's an abbreviation, please be respectful. God bless each and every single one of you, and I will see you in part two. Bye.